I'm Sean Bose, concert visual designer in Los Angeles, California, and today we are talking to Colin Strang. Colin is a 3D motion designer based in Los Angeles who specializes in concert visuals for touring artists. He's worked with artists such as Rezz, Kayzo, Martin Garrix, Sudden Death, 12th Planet, Downlink, Allison Wonderland. There's too many to list, and the list keeps growing. Without further ado, Colin, welcome. Thanks for being here.
Of course, man. Happy to be here.
Awesome. Did I miss anything in that? Did I fuck anything up?
No, dude, that's a good summary for sure. Just lots of wacky, crazy visuals for a lot of cool DJs, pretty much.
Hell yeah, yeah. That's the name of the game. Um, so let's start with some basics. Let's go way back. Where did you grow up? What was that like? Uh, what were you into as a kid, as a teenager?
Yeah,
Give us the
totally.
origin story, superhero.
So I grew up in Ojai, California. But I think the story kind of really starts when I was in high school. And I actually went to a high school that was in the next town over, Ventura. So I was like going back and forth all the time. But I guess my point is that, like, after school, I'd usually go back to Ojai, and most of my friends would be in Ventura. So I wouldn't see them as much. I was still like, I had friends, and had a great time with them, but I had a lot of time to myself. And it was at that point that I started like kind of picking up Photoshop and like other design programs, and kind of got a start with all that. But as far as like animation goes, it started in college when I was DJing a bunch. And I realized that I could use this cool program, Cinema 4D, to make like my logos spin around and just like put it up on like a video screen or some on like a TV in the bar that I was playing or something. And I just kind of kept on making them. And it was so much fun. I was just like having a blast learning about it. And then after a certain point, one of my friends was like catching on to that, and it's like, hey, like, you should like really start doing this for other people, and like start like, pushing this, and like try to like see what you could do if you were to like, make some money off of some of these. And uh, I ended up like making some stuff for local people, and that was like really great. I would be like cold, DMing or emailing like different people. Uh, and a couple would get back, and I was making like small little packs. And then one of my friends, uh, Sean Downs, he actually went to high school with at the time Allison Wonderland's to yeah, well, he went to high school with Allison Wonderland's VJ Alex Vicente. And it was him that actually kind of like got me my first big gig. And basically reached out to him. It's like, hey, like, I'm just making some visuals, would love to work with you. And he was like, yeah, it's like, go ahead and make some stuff, send it over. If it's dope, we'll put it in the show. Pretty
Nice.
like low pressure, but high pressure at the same time, because it's like huge, and one of those huge moments. And ended up making a couple visuals. A lot of them were not that cool, but one of them was pretty cool, and that ended up being included in her show. And that ended up turning into later a gig where I actually made a bunch of content for her Coachella performance. So it was like, like local, big. It was like just this like explosive kind of trajectory. And then after that point, it was just like using that as like a backing and being like, hey, like, I've done this, I can show you this, like, let's work together. And that kind of just started the snowball effect um, into all these other companies, or not
Nice.
companies, but
Yeah. So let's dig into some of these a little bit. Um, going way back to the beginning. Like what first got you into like, hey, I'm gonna pick up Photoshop, or like I'm gonna start messing around in After Effects just in your free time? Was
yeah.
that like how'd you get into that? Where were you learning this stuff from?
Yeah, totally. Um, well, my dad actually, when I was in high school, he kind of started this like tile business, and it wasn't like a normal tile business, but it was like backsplash type tile business, and they use this like sublimation technology to like print graphics onto the tiles. Like a lot of people use it for like t-shirts and stuff.
Yeah, yeah.
So but we had this thing in the shop where we had a green screen that we could pull down, and people in the harbor, it was their stores in the harbor, it was like a touristy area, and people that would come in, they would, go stand in front of the green screen, and then we tell them like come back in an hour, and we'll have you like in front of a photo of the harbor on a tile. So like we had to get Photoshop, and I ended up being the person that had to like, take the green screen out and like put a photo behind them. And I just had my hands in Photoshop doing stuff like that for a while. But when the shop was slow, I would like do these tutorials on like making all these like wacky psychedelic graphics, tons of like really trippy stuff. And usually it'd be like, me and like my total dorky like high school long surfer hair and stuff. Like, I'd take a photo of me like in front of the green screen, and then like put all these like swirly graphics behind me and stuff. And I don't know, it was just like a fun way to get into it. And then uh, I kept on going down that tutorial route and just like learning more and more about Photoshop. And I guess the true segue to Cinema 4D was actually a cinema or a Photoshop tutorial that at one point just threw it in there to like download Cinema 4D and like make this like swirly deformed piece of geometry and throw it into your like Photoshop comp. And so that was like the intro.
Sick. That's awesome. I love little like, these random factoids that you can
Yeah.
kind of pull out. Um, I'd love to see some of that early Photoshop work if
Oh
you have
man.
any of that
Oh
kicking
yeah.
around.
I think it's
Toss it
like
up.
in some like Facebook like album somewhere. Like it's like deep in my Facebook like
Yeah.
photo albums.
Unarchive the MySpace page and
Yeah. Oh yeah.
hell yeah. All right, so you're messing around with some of that. You're eventually you start DJing and playing out and like realize that, you know, there's these screens, people are throwing stuff up there, and you start making stuff for yourself.
Mhm.
Um, and some of your other friends who are DJs and stuff like that, I assume,
Yeah.
in the scene, and they're like, you should do this for other people. Um, and one of your friends is like, actually, you know, I'm doing this for this DJ Allison Wonderland. Like, you should help me out with this.
Yeah.
Um,
Pretty much.
did you get paid for that first project? Were there any like early projects before
I mean,
that?
like, yes, they were, you know, I was in that phase where I was, a complete noob and I had no idea what I was doing. So I wasn't charging much, if at all. I had this like kind of price sheet that was uh pretty low. But it's like there's a time for that. It's like you gotta pay your dues, you gotta like build your portfolio, you gotta like learn, you gotta like figure out, especially if you're freelancing, you have to like, learn the ropes of, navigating like the client world. And it definitely, like, I don't look back on that and I'm never like, oh, I didn't make enough money. It's like it's a part of the learning process. I feel like everybody should, if they're starting from like the point where they're just learning like 3D or design or whatever from like ground zero, like I feel like most people should be in that position for a little while, because it takes away some of the pressure, like it allows you to kind of like grow and learn without like this expectation that you have to like absolutely crush it.
Yeah.
So
Yeah, it's a good point. Like you can kind of make things, and you mentioned that some of them were all right and made it in the show, but some of them were pretty interesting and
yeah.
maybe didn't make the cut. But at the same time, you're like, well, I threw it out there, and I'm stoked that a couple of these of these
Mhm.
clips made it on stage.
Yeah.
And it's not really about that. at that point, it's just about like getting the opportunity and throwing things, throwing things out there and see what happens and learning. Um, yeah, I definitely agree. A few of my early gigs were pretty sparse in the paycheck department, but they were fun and I was stoked. And that's kind of part of getting in there.
Yeah.
So that was through a friend of yours. You mentioned also like cold emailing and things like that. Like when you were first starting out, how are you getting the word out, and how are you making these connections?
Well, there's kind of like a mixture of different things that ended up working. It was funny because when I was in college and when I was DJing a bunch, I was living in Arizona at the time. And being in Flagstaff, Arizona, like a little mountain town, you can't really network offline. Like you can't like go to like a MoGraph party. You can't go to like all these industry events and like meet all the people that are making it happen. You can't go get lunch with like somebody that you want to work with. It's like it's all over Instagram, essentially, at least at that point. So a lot of it was just, messaging different studios. Imminent was actually, I'm sure we'll get to that later, but Imminent was the first studio that actually got back to me. And this was like soon after the Allison Wonderland gig where I was like, hey, it's like, I'm available. I'd love to work on some stuff with you. If you ever need any help, let me know. And it was like a month or two later that they actually got back to me and put me on a Liquid Stranger gig. And as like, I love the EDM scene. And so like every time when a name pops up, it's like, oh my God, I get to work with Liquid Stranger. It's like, it was all of those, especially those like earlier gigs, those like, emails where you get to see like who it's for, like every time that would happen, I'd be like through the moon. But I guess I'm getting kind of sidetracked. When I was in Flagstaff, it was all kind of digital, or not digital, but like, you'd be reaching out mostly via Instagram. There was one time though, where actually a show came through and, I had like a little USB stick with like my work, like a reel and like contact information. Thank you. And that's Sophia, by the way.
Hello.
Yeah, you've met Sophia. Cool. So what was I saying? Yeah, I had a little USB stick with my reel and like contact information, and I would just like try to like give it to every VJ that would come through Flagstaff. And one team where that actually worked was with the Closey team. It was my third time seeing her in Flagstaff, and she was actually, Chloe was up kind of in the front of house area, just like messing with the lasers for one of the openers or the lights or whatever. And I just like tapped her on the shoulder and was like, hey, like take this. And then just like, she was in her zone. I didn't want to bug her. So I just like passed it and I dipped. And then I got like a email, a couple days later being like, hey, it's like, we looked at the USB. It's really cool stuff. Like it's actually good timing because we were about to start looking for artists for our Coachella performance. So it was just like, it's like, I think I got lucky with like the Coachella opportunities for sure. But that was like, that was a cool one. Cause like, it was after so many like digital Instagram connections to like physically give like someone something and have that like in-person interaction. It felt great. And I think, well, yeah, it was just really nice.
Yeah, that's awesome. I haven't heard of somebody doing that yet, so that's a super cool, unique
pro tip: always have a
tactic.
USB with you.
Yeah, right. Yeah, that's that's a super clever way to just like be able to stand out a little bit, give some people a bunch of work really easily. It's something they can toss in their pocket or their bag or whatever and like check out later. Yeah, that's awesome. So I'm going to go back a little bit to college. What did you study this stuff in college? How did you learn how to do 3D?
I studied mechanical engineering. Yeah, it's very different for sure. But the one thing that engineering is great for is like being able to learn how to learn, and how to like grind. There were so many like late nights and just like getting through, like the classes and the exams and the assignments and the capstone and the projects. Like it took so much work. And in order to also fit in like the fun stuff, like hanging out with friends and like going out and DJing and learning how to like make visuals, it didn't feel like it, but it was like a major grind at some points, and it was like kind of figuring out how to balance everything. So yeah, it was like a crash course in that because it didn't work for a while. I had to like kind of figure it out as I went. But
that's awesome. It's almost like you got your like your moonlighting years out of the way while doing college, because you were just kind of like forced to do this stuff as like nights and weekends. And then most people do that like during their first job, or like while they're working at a pizza place or something like that. You're just like, I'm just gonna fucking do the hardest major ever, and also get fucking crazy at 3D.
Well, I feel like I should probably clarify the timelines, because I feel like I was learning a lot of the 3D stuff when I was in college, but like when it really picked up and when I like really committed a lot of time into it was like the 2 or so years after college, and I decided to stay in Flagstaff. And I kind of transitioned. Well, I didn't transition. I ended up doing both DJing at like fun bar gigs and stuff, but I also started DJing weddings, and my rent was like absurdly low. And, I would be able to go out and DJ, 2 weddings in a month, and like all my bills would be paid for. So I had like an obscene amount of time on my hands to just like dive in head first and learn so much. And I feel like really lucky looking back to have had that opportunity to like not have, I don't know, it just worked out really well. So
yeah, that's actually I think you had actually told me about that before. But that's really, that's really cool if you can have a job like that that's doesn't take up a ton of time. You just kind of go to the event, do your thing, and that's it. Get paid enough to handle whatever you need to handle, and then you have all this time for learning, practicing, doing something else.
Yeah,
that's awesome. Hell yeah. It was like full-time learning with a DJ side hustle that paid your bills.
Yeah, I feel like it was a pretty, like I said, like a pretty special set of circumstances that,
no, that works out great. And you can, it shows that you were spending a fuck ton of time on this stuff, because your shit's nuts. Let's see what man, do you have any, this is kind of off topic, but do you have any like ridiculous wedding DJ horror stories that you could share?
I was never part of like a chaotic wedding. Like nothing ever went like really wrong, but there were several times where things just didn't really work. Probably the worst was actually, thank God it wasn't my fault. I was just like a witness to like what it all happened. But it was monsoon season in Arizona is a thing. It's a great time of year. Like it's monsoon season is like a really rainy but sunny time of year. Like these rolling thunder clouds will come in, and they're really gorgeous, and like you have these like lightning storms, and it'll rain really hard, but it'll only last for like 15 minutes to an hour. And then it will go away and it'll be like sunny and perfect. And I forget like what months out of the year it is, but it's a time of month where lots of people decide to have weddings. And there's this one, there were several weddings that ended up getting rained on because of monsoons, but this one had to completely relocate their ceremony venue like last minute because it started raining, and to this way to a venue that was like arguably way less cool. And so that was like the first straw. And then the second straw was that the wedding cake arrived and it was the wrong cake. And the bride was very upset about that. And then the third thing is that the wedding planner was a no call, no show. And so they sent their like wedding planner assistants, like two assistants in her place. And but they were in day clothes and they couldn't enter the floor. So they had to like stay in the kitchen and like talk to the staff to like let them like push people out and like notify people around. But it's like so, it was a mess. And the bride was like, she took it pretty well, but I could tell she was like livid inside. And again, I was just like a witness, and it ended up like turning into like a really fun party. Everybody was dancing, so that was good. But it was just like thing after thing after thing. Yeah, so
Yeah, can you even do that? No call, no show as a wedding planner? Like that's
I couldn't believe it, honestly. But
wow, that's crazy. As a DJ, do you do much VJing or are you primarily content?
uh, I mean, when I was DJing, when I would kind of bring my own stuff, I would usually kind of make these hour-long loops and just like put it on a laptop and let it run. It was anything crazy. Uh, I personally haven't really VJ'd that much in general. I have like little bits here and there, like mostly at those like little local bar events. But for the most part, when I would be DJing, I'd be DJing. And shout out to Josh at Joshua Tree Media, who was like the visual guy in Flagstaff. Like if you had an event that needed visuals, like he was the guy. And you know, like me and him were like, yeah, we were tight. And you know, like I would pass him stuff, and he would just like make it go crazy up on the walls. So I was like lucky to have a really good friend in the scene that was a VJ, and he would just like go crazy with the content that I would pass him. So
Nice. Um, Similar type of question. I like to ask these just to because everybody kind of is a different combination of the various jobs that you can do that
yeah,
are concert visuals, you know, from
sure.
performance to content creation. And then within content creation, you know, there's like fully freelance working directly with artists or artist management. There's also, you know, working for studios who do that
Yeah.
type of thing. Um, where do you fall like percentage wise with that stuff, and what are your thoughts on those two different ways of working?
It's a good question. Um, I would say when I was getting started, it was mostly, well, I don't know. It's been like so back and forth the entire time because it is a good point to bring up in that, you know, like working directly with artists is fairly different than working with uh, you know, studios, and both have like their pros and cons for sure. I've enjoyed doing both. I think they're both great. You know, it's both have really taught me a lot, and I think everybody, you know, if they're in this space, should try to like have a balance between the two, just for like the sake of learning, you know, both sides. Because when you work directly with an artist, you know, you get that client facing experience and like how to like communicate with the client and like figure out what they need. You kind of get to like wear all the hats. You get to be like the creative director, you get to be, you know, the person that actually makes the content. Maybe you bring in some friends and like it's just a blast. You know, like I worked a ton with uh Andrew Gasoline, and those gigs were just so much fun. Like we would just, you know, get in touch directly with the client, an artist, and figure out exactly what they were looking for, and then we would just like go for it and make the craziest shit straight out of our brains, you know. And that's like, and that's all working with an artist. And then working with a studio is also really amazing because then you get that experience of working with sometimes a larger team. You get to, you know, understand, you know, like how these companies that are a bit bigger, that are how they operate and how they run, and like uh you might get in touch with bigger artists, people that you might not necessarily work with one-on-one, if it's just you. Um, like, and it's also like a really awesome way to build your portfolio if you're getting started is, if, like a lot of the bigger names that I've worked with have been through studios because they're the ones that are getting these bigger contracts for the bigger artists. People like, you mentioned Martin Garrix earlier. That's a perfect case. Working with Strange Loop, working with them on that project. So yeah, it's both are really great. And I think I've been lucky to have a pretty solid balance between the two. And there's probably a lot more that you could talk about between, both of those different types. But yeah.
Nice. Yeah, they're definitely kind of different worlds, but both interesting and in their own way.
Yeah. Both come with their own headaches too.
yeah, definitely. Pros and cons.
Yeah.
But yeah, I mean, it's good to be able to do both and stay flexible, I think.
Yeah.
Speaking of that, I mean, this past year was a little gnarly for the concert visuals world. And I think it's really interesting. Part of the reason why I'm, selecting people for this little show that I'm doing, this little series, is, you guys are my friends who have found some success over the last year in an industry that, kind of completely fell apart and went on its head. What types of things did you do? What were you thinking back in, April or March, whenever it was that all the shows got canceled? What was going through your head? What did you do in the months after that? And like, what got you through this?
Yeah. I guess I have to jump forward a little bit. At this point, I was working at Imminent. Well, so after a certain point, moved to LA through like, that's its own kind of story, but eventually landed in LA. And yeah, it was interesting because I started working at Imminent in February of last year. And, around mid-March, things like got kind of crazy. So I was like, had just started working at the studio. And again, I'd worked with them in the past doing like freelance gigs, but, as like on the clock, employee there, I just started working there. And there was like a lot of uncertainty at that point, like you said, the industry so upside down with like concerts just being, like the rug was just like taken out from the industry. And like all of a sudden it's like, what's there? And, there was a period of time where things were really upside down. And there was a lot of like, oh my God, like this is crazy. Like we just moved here. Like we're like, this is like, I don't know what's happening. And there was a point where, there was like, trying to find the right way to put this. It was just really stressful about, maybe what would happen to my job. And luckily, Imminent got one of those small business loans. And that just kind of like gave the company enough time and resources to like, do a couple jobs here and there because there was work. It was just so low paying that, it probably wouldn't sustain the company if we just kept on doing that. But because of that loan, it was able to, I don't know, just keep the boat afloat. And I have to say, like, I'm extremely grateful to Imminent, Drew, Tara, all them for, just continuing to support me through that time because, like I said, lots of uncertainty and, the industry being so upside down, like lots of my friends are just like, out of work. And yeah, it was just like such a crazy time. But after using that kind of time period with the assistance from the loan, like I think it allowed us to kind of like regroup and find like new avenues to maybe start looking at. And a lot of that ended up being using Unreal Engine to start doing like virtual events, because, you know, if concerts are gone and events in general are gone, you know, the next best thing is to start making these like online experiences where people can still feel like they're connected to this industry or this scene, and, you know, stay involved. And so we kind of like latched onto that and started, you know, going for these like virtual experiences. And I think that's what has really kind of kept us going. So that pivot took time, and it was like a while of like, oh my God, like is this going to last? You know, it's like we had just signed a lease at a place, and that was scary. It's like, oh, like what if this goes upside down and we're just like here? It was a really like stressful time for sure. But I feel like really fortunate to have pretty much worked the entire time.
Nice. Wow. So, yeah. Big shout out to Drew for, I mean, I feel like he's been a pivotal part of a lot of our careers that I've talked to so far anyway. And yeah, I owe him a lot too for this past year. I mean, we spent some time exploring some of that virtual concert stuff over that summer as well. And like, man,
yeah, you helped lay down the foundation for sure. Like the notch stuff that you built, like it was crazy.
Yeah, I mean, if we didn't do that, and then like I started getting into Unreal as well, like, you know, that led me to a lot of things that really helped me stay alive over the past year. And yeah, I had actually a pretty great year, which feels a little weird to say, but yeah. Like it kind of worked out.
Same.
But yeah, and man, I didn't realize, you're making me kind of go back and think, like time has sort of dilated over this past year and like is somewhat meaningless. But even at the beginning of 2020, things were so nuts, like so fast paced that like I thought in my head you had been like working at Imminent for like a year when this happened.
Yeah.
And like I know you had been doing projects over over the years up until that point, but like I feel like we were in that basement room working together for like a year or so. Like there's no way it was just like a month or two.
Yeah, it was. I mean, we did do some work in December, so kind of backtracking a little bit. Moved from Flagstaff. In September.
Let's go back to the coming to LA and the Imminent origin story.
Yeah, totally. So like I said, I had done several freelance gigs remotely with Imminent. Mm-hmm. One of them was even like one of the first studio gigs that I had done. And, you know, after a certain point, you know, kind of had the realization that like, if I want to like take this further, you got to get to LA, or I had to get to LA. And I was actually at a music festival in Denver with Sophia, and we were like, it's like, she was like, I'll go with you where like we need to go. And then that just started this like snowball effect of like, you know, like, oh, like what if like we went here? Like what if we went to Denver? Like what if we went to, you know, like Oregon? What if we went to LA? And like LA obviously being like the best career move. But and then later, like we kind of decided on, I think it was like a Halloween, we're like, you know what, we have to go to LA. Like this has to be it. Like in order for like this momentum to keep going, like we have to like get out there. And just to like have that connection with, you know, like the studios and start getting some studio experience, because I had been doing mostly freelance work, and I had this like desire to also try working at a studio and just like to get like a full taste of everything. And so we made the decision, we're moving to LA. And so in September, we moved out and kind of did like a gradual move where we went to my parents' place in Ojai, and which is about like an hour and a half away from LA. And I would drive into LA and stay in like Airbnbs and work different jobs at different studios and try to get a feel for it. And one of those was working with Drew at Imminent. And I had a really, really great experience working on some like crazy visuals for 12th Planet, just like insane stuff. Like, this crazy like elephant squid thing. And so, like, I don't know, it was so much fun making that content. I had a really great time. I think that's when I first met you. And when I started meeting like the rest of the team, and I don't know, it just really clicked. And so after a certain amount of time, started talking with Drew, and we made it happen, and I joined the team. In that interim period, we ended up living in Long Beach for a little while, just so that Sophia could, be closer to her design internship in Long Beach. And so I was just like kind of commuting from Long Beach for a little while, but then we actually moved into an apartment in LA, Highland Park, the day that lockdown started. So that was like a really crazy experience, because like my actual like living in LA time started the day that lockdown began.
Wow.
So like, and I feel like we haven't completely gotten out of that. It's like I'm really excited to fully check out the city once things start opening up again.
Wow, yeah, that is nuts, huh? You were like, that was like mid-March or whatever. You moved in,
Mm-hmm.
finally got the place, moved in, and then
Yeah, it's crazy.
wow.
It's insane. But yeah, and then like I said, in February I started working with their team, and it's been really great. I'm very happy there.
Nice.
Yeah.
So what is it about LA that that made you want to move here and makes it like the place? And it's kind of a weird question to ask because of the circumstances and everything, but like, do you think is that a necessary move? Is it a useful move?
Yeah, I think
Has that changed over the past year now that you've been like,
dude, 100%. Like honestly, I can speak to my experience, and I can guess about like if it had been like a year later, like what I might be thinking. But in my experience, I was like, I want to go try working in a studio. I want to like, even if it was just freelancing, like I wanted to like sit in the chair in the studio and have that experience. And I don't know if that would change for me. For other people, like Andrew, who I mentioned before, Gasoline, he lives in Prescott. He's gonna hate me for messing that up, but he has like an awesome setup out there, and he's like stoked to be there. And I was like, hey dude, you should come with me. And he was like, hell no, I don't want to go to LA. And anyways, I feel like everybody has their own reasons for wanting to be where they are, or going where they want to go. But for me, I really wanted to sit in that chair, and that's my big thing. But it's really interesting now that work from home has become so big, and I feel like it was already existing in our space, like our industry. That's like what I was doing when I was in Flagstaff. That's what, say, like Andrew's doing right now. And like we're working with some people up in Canada right now. And yeah, it's I think easier than ever to work remotely and like build your career almost in the same way as if you were here remotely. There's always going to be drawbacks and pros and cons and things. And I think there is like value in being in the space where it's all happening. And that was another thing for me, is like I wanted to really see what it was all about, and I couldn't do that from my bedroom in Flagstaff. But definitely, I feel like that's kind of like going back and forth all over the place. Hopefully that answers your question. But
yeah, no, that makes a lot of sense. I think this year has been interesting because it's not happening as much, but there is definitely something to be said for being in the room and just being able to sit next to another amazing artist and like look over their shoulder and see what they're working on and how they're making it. Like, you know, I've learned a ton of tricks from you and Eddie and everybody that comes through that studio and the other studios that I've worked at. Like, you never know who you're going to be sitting next to, and like everybody's got, you know, some crazy skills that you can learn from. And like being able to ask for help with something that like you can't quite figure out, instead of just like pacing around your bedroom, you know.
Yeah, it's fun. Yeah, earlier you kind of mentioned that how, you know, like everybody kind of wears their own hats, has their own distribution of like what they can bring to the table. And I think I like and it could be a range of like, you know, different things. Like in our industry, like someone could be mostly VJ, but they can also make content, or there's like people that are content creators that can also VJ, and a whole range in between. And then you start adding in like other skills, and it just like everybody has their own like, you know, tree of skill tree. And I don't think I fully understood that until I got out here and sat down next to people like you and everybody else that I've had the pleasure of working with, and getting to see that everybody's like in this space is like really good at something. And when they all come together and like work on these projects, it just like turns into something amazing that, you know, like if it were just to be yourself, might not be possible. So
yeah, definitely. You get exposed to things that like you might not ever hear about. Like I first heard about Notch because of working in a studio and somebody had it, and I was like, wait, you know, what's that thing?
Yeah.
And
then you dove deep into that world.
Yeah, and like kind of, and you know, had the opportunity to because we got this gig, and you know, Drew wanted to try it out, and he's like, are you down to learn this for a Coachella project? I'm like, sure, I guess. Like, let's fucking do it. And you know, just kind of dove into it. But like, you know, I'm not about to pay a couple $100 a month for a software I don't know how to use.
That's going back to our earlier conversation about like the difference. I guess we haven't fully talked about, it was all in the context of freelance. Talking earlier about like working with the studio versus directly with artists, but like freelance versus studio work, and having access to like some crazy equipment and tools that you might not have as a freelancer has been like a really cool thing for me. And I think it ties into what you're describing right now, is that like there are benefits to, you know, working with studios like that, because you get to like experiment and play with things you might not get to otherwise.
Yeah, definitely. The amount of resources that a studio might have compared to what you have, and like the size of the budget that they're able to get for those resources can be wildly different. And you might not think to bring in this software because like you're trying to keep overhead low when you're working in your bedroom or whatever, or you just might not even know about it. And then somebody busts out like this Notch project, you're like, what the hell is that? Let me borrow that license and start playing with this. You know?
Yeah, exactly.
That's definitely an advantage, I would say. And I really like working at studios for that reason. Just the people that you meet and the things you get exposed to can be really interesting. Let's see. Speaking of those sorts of things, what are the, this is kind of a more basic question, but like, what are those tools that you're using on a daily basis? What are some of the ones that you're kind of excited about or exploring? You know, give us a sense of, if somebody's trying to do this stuff, like what should they be playing with?
Well, as I was saying earlier, at Imminent, we've been doing a lot of virtual production stuff. And I know you have been as well. And that kind of ties into the whole world of like XR as well too, which is just like so huge right now. And yeah, I feel like all the tools and kind of programs that have gone along with that, Unreal being one of the big ones. Uh, I don't, I'm not sure if I would have been working as much in Unreal as I am now if it wasn't for, excuse me, working at Imminent. Uh, it's a really incredible program, but like I just love Cinema 40 and Octane, and I think I probably wouldn't have left, or not that I've left, but like I wouldn't have, you know, gone away from it as much as I have now, if it wasn't for working at Imminent. But yeah, all of like the tools that we've been using in tandem with Unreal and being able to like sit in a room where you're having, like a grand MA like pipe in DMX into this software, which is then being routed into a computer and spread out over, or actually into multiple computers and spread out over all these different screens, and just like sitting in this crazy control room and like, just making it happen, and working in like a team, where, like everybody's able to contribute to the same project in a way that, hasn't really been possible for me in cinema. This might be kind of a departure of what you were saying, but I guess the point is that, yeah, Unreal virtual production, like all the tools that have gone along with that has been like the recent major like learning experience. So
Nice. Yeah, definitely. I like hadn't touched Unreal this time last year. And now I'm like teaching people how to use it. It's pretty crazy.
yeah, it's really awesome.
So yeah, so Unreal is sort of, I've been recommending that to everybody just because it's so powerful. It's crazy. And do you think you'll continue to use Unreal in not virtual production environments? Like, do you think you'll render
totally.
VJ loops out of it, things like that?
100%. I think for like VJ loops, I think there'll always be a balance between cinema and Unreal, but like there is such huge potential in Unreal, and I'm such like a noob at Unreal, but I've started following some people that are have been spending a lot more time over like years in Unreal, and the stuff that they're accomplishing in Unreal Engine is of such great quality, and even approaching the level of like Octane and Cinema or Redshift or whatever, and it's rendering in real time, and if not real time, it's like kicking out multiple frames a second. So like you can make these super long format things like so fast. Like we did a music video a little while ago, for actually 2 music videos for this group Unknown Brain, and we used Unreal Engine to make those music videos, and it was so crazy to finish a shot and then render it, just like let it play through, and then it's like baked to frames, and you don't have to wait like overnight and set up a render queue or any of that. It's just done and it's there, and then you can like pass it to the creative director. They get to instantly look at it. They're like, oh yeah, let's just change that little color there, and let's make sure this display is yellow. And then you change it, you re-render it, and it's there. It's not like you have to like set up that queue like I was talking about, and but that's like all the good stuff. I will say, like I think I want to like put my head through my desk like more often in Unreal. Like it can be such a bitch, like it.
Yeah.
So I'm sure you can read. I feel like you've been doing so much like technical stuff in Unreal. Like I'm sure that you like encounter, it's like constant problem solving, I imagine.
Yeah. I fucking hate Unreal. I'm like, man, I love it. I hate it. It's like, it could be so frustrating as an artist, because, we're pushing it to places that it was not really meant to go.
Yeah.
And they're putting a lot of money and R&D into getting it to the places that we're pushing it to in a way that feels like an actual workflow.
It's definitely like in development for that type of work.
Yeah, sure. We're like very much in beta mode as far as like motion graphics and and production, and like XR does not exist. It is not a real thing. It wasn't supposed to be real for another couple of years.
And now like everybody
we're just
wants
like,
wants to use it, and
like it barely works. Let's do it. And
yeah, like the amount of like just, I don't know, problems that do come up is like pretty insane. And sometimes I feel like mentally I'm weighing that against that render time that you say. You know, it's like how much troubleshooting do you do before you're basically spending the same amount of time on a project anyways. So
yeah, definitely. And it's, you know, it comes down to also, you know, like how fast can you work at something? If you're, you know, a wizard in cinema and Octane, you could probably do that shit with your eyes closed.
Yeah,
you just know 100%. Where everything is. You have all your plugins, everything is like your pipeline's set up. It's been set up.
It was definitely like, kind of like almost an ego check to like get into Unreal and start messing with that, because, you know, like I feel like I'm like extremely confident in Cinema 4D and Octane, and, you know, like ask me to make a pack and I could throw something together that's like using a lot of really cool stuff pretty quickly. But, you know, that was all in one like small ecosystem where like certain things that matter to like other programs and whatever else just like didn't matter in my workflow. So I just didn't learn it, or I didn't use it. And then going into Unreal, you know, like all this stuff like all of a sudden matters. And it's like, oh, I have like so much to catch up on. Like, you know, like everything needs like UV channels. Like you can't like box project anything. Like, of course not. Everything needs UV maps. So you better learn how to do that. You better learn how to like set up your materials. You better learn like, you know, source control. You better learn all these things. It becomes it. Yeah. But like I said, it was an ego check because it made me realize that there's so much to this space and industry that I haven't touched yet that is like really important. And it kind of got me to start thinking about those things. So
yeah, there's this guy I work with, Spencer Sterling, who's he's like a mad scientist. Kid's like 27 or something, and like just a wizard, and very smart. But he says this phrase all the time that he's like, I found a gap in my knowledge in this, and then he'll go learn it. But like the way that he thinks about that, when he like finds something that he doesn't know, he'll be like, yeah, I have a gap in my knowledge about like the Unreal Niagara system. So I'm gonna spend a day on that. I'm like, you know.
Oh, like that's a good way to put it. It's not like, oh, I don't know this. It's like, oh, I have like, it's just like a thing that I have to learn.
Yeah, there's a space that I need to fill in. So I'm gonna focus on that. And I mean, that's why he knows a fuck ton of stuff. But dude, I feel you're coming from Cinema 4D, which like is very artist friendly. It lets you get away with a lot of like technical, you know, not exactly the technically right way to do things. It kind of just lets you make stuff, and it looks fast. Good, and it works.
Just like gets you to, especially with Octane, you know, like you start like you just set up a scene with like default stuff, and it just looks amazing, and you don't have to like set up a ton of stuff, which is really, really great for like, you know, especially like previs stuff, or like when you're asked to like make something on a really tight timeline. But yeah.
And Unreal is like that for a game engine, but it's still like, you got to be a bit of a nerd to get into it.
Yeah, because like you can kind of skate by and do, from what I've observed, you can definitely like kind of skate by and just be the level designer, be the person that, you know, is the creative in this project. But at a certain point, like you're gonna have to like, I don't know, start figuring out some blueprints, and and that's when it starts to get like, oh, that's been tough for me, like the whole like blueprint.
Like stuff. I've worked in cinema for years, and like maybe use like a range remapper as far as like
Yeah.
espresso goes, you know, like,
Yeah, totally.
but you need to get in there and be programming some stuff in Unreal to make anything interesting.
Yeah.
Yeah. So yeah, Unreal is in the new world, Cinema, Octane in the old world. And hopefully that world is coming back.
I don't know. I think it is. I feel like a lot of people still just want, because like I feel like there's right now, I really feel like a designer, and that, like, you know, like something has to get made and you have to figure out how to make it. But there are lots of artists, you know, and I definitely kind of consider myself to be an artist too, but like I feel like my job is to be a designer. And the difference being like kind of like making something for someone versus yourself. And I feel like if I was making something for myself, I would make art in Cinema and Octane, because like I know it really well, and I could get to these results that I have in my head. It's like I'll have an idea and I know that I'll be able to get there like faster and it'll look like really nice in Cinema. And I think that there's a lot of people that are still of that headspace. At least like I think I'm talking about like coming like a cinema artist who's now working in Unreal. I'm sure there's like tons of people that have just been in Unreal and that's their jam. And I'm sure they feel like they're what I'm describing just in Unreal, and Godspeed, man. That's insane. But like I guess my point is that I don't think that like a lot of these tools are going to go away. I think that people are going to keep finding uses for them, especially with like the rise of NFTs. And you know, like these people that are just making cool art, and it's not dependent on how it's being made. It's just like how they're being artists. They're making art for themselves or collectors, whatever. And I think the program doesn't matter as much for that kind of thing. For designer stuff like the virtual production, it has to be Unreal. You know, you have to learn Unreal. So that's like the route you have to take if you want to, like, I don't know, be working on that project. Yeah. But as an artist, you have way more flexibility, and you can like really just decide what tools work best for you. And for that reason, I don't see Cinema, which is so user friendly, and Octane and Redshift, which are so user friendly. I don't think they're going to go away because people have so much fun using them.
Yeah, so it's a great point. And you know, the workflow can tie you into certain things. I tell people also, every video that I do, there's inevitably a comment that's like, what about Blender? And my response is always like, dude, Blender's great. It's getting better. It's like, it's pretty fucking sick. A lot of things that it does are better than Cinema. I don't use it personally because, you know, I only have so much time in the day to learn new software. Yep. But like, go ahead. But also I enjoy working in studios, and that's what the studios use for the most part. So like, you kind of have to, that's one example of like,
you're saying a lot of the studios are using Blender or something?
No, they use Cinema. So like you kind of get tied in with an existing workflow. So you kind of have to use that if you want to be part of that. It's the same like with the virtual production stuff. Standard. Yeah. You know, like you could show up using, you know, Unity or fucking Roblox or something and make a game, but like that's not what people are using. So
yeah, definitely. Also for like collaboration, let's say you're not even working, maybe you're just like wanting to, you know, work with your friends, you know, same thing if you're a music producer. If you were like, I'm sure that people do it and they find ways, but like I'm sure it's a lot harder to like produce like Ableton with like FL. Or excuse me, if you were using Ableton and somebody else was using FL to like collaborate, I imagine it would be harder than just two people using Ableton.
Right. Yeah.
So,
you know, if your whole squad's the Blender gang, then fucking go for it.
Like, I don't think that's far away.
I've seen some awesome work coming out of it. I feel like the next generation of studios is going to be like
Blender. All the coolest recent shit I feel like has been out of Blender, and I feel like one of the big reasons is that like this free program, which is now becoming as strong or stronger than these paid expensive programs. Same thing with Unreal. You can practically have this like free pipeline to make art digitally and in 3D. And as a person who's like starting to learn all this stuff, why wouldn't you go that route? Why would you pay $60 a month to like, to like start getting into it? Like, I don't know. I totally think that Blender is gonna start really making more waves. And for example, like a lot of the people that I've talked to that are like new, like they'll reach out and be like, hey, like, how do you do this? Like, what do you recommend? How do I get started? I push them towards Blender. I'm like, yo, like you should learn this because there's a huge community around it. There's so many tutorials, so many like YouTube personalities, which I find really interesting compared to like other programs.
Yeah.
But like so many resources, such like a strong community that like seems like it's massive and it's free, like why wouldn't you? And I think that like as more and more kids and just like people in general start getting into the scene and taking that route, it's just going to slowly start to like grow and grow and grow. And then most people are going to be using that instead of cinema. Even the other day, I was like trying to solve a problem in Unreal, like a modeling problem. And like the answer, like I couldn't find an answer for cinema. Everything was about Blender. So I think it's started. Like, I think that it's not going to take as long as I think it will even.
Yeah. Yeah, definitely. I see the wave coming. And I'm honestly intrigued. I've just been, not enough time, but like,
I feel that like
it's got that fucking Eevee renderers. It's like basically real time.
Yep.
Which is great. So it's like kind of this hybrid cinema Unreal experience. It's like, it's nuts. It's crazy.
Definitely. I definitely feel it on the time part though, because when you're like working and you're like, I don't know, trying to learn Unreal or whatever program, it's gotta kind of choose your priorities for sure.
Yeah. Let's see. Can I ask you some businessy questions? We'll kind of rapid fire a little bit through a few and then wrap this up if
Sure.
that sounds good to you. Strategy. We talked a little bit about this at the beginning about the early days. And I feel like you're a bit more studio oriented these days, being #imminent gang. But strategies, tactics for getting work. What's worked for you in the past? What's your like go-to move? What's your advice for people about that?
Or people that maybe don't have as much of a portfolio, or people that like people that are newer in the scene?
Anything.
Anybody. Sure.
Yeah. What's important? What works?
Well, just like
experience.
Networking is way more important than anybody tells you it is. And I feel like some people are like naturally really good at it and just like kind of very social in that space. And some people, it might have to take a little bit more effort to kind of like reach out and not feel like you're being too annoying, but I think like kind of like figuring out how to maneuver communicating with potential clients and studios and artists, and even like deciding to collaborate with somebody, and just like starting to kind of widen that net and like kind of create that web of like clients and friends in the space, and just really kind of like, I don't know, just networking is so important. Just putting yourself out there in a way that is showing the kind of work that you want to be doing is a big part. And let's say that you want to make concert visuals, and your page is just like stills. Like what does that say to a client about like they can't tell what your animation is like, or vice versa. If you're trying to make like album covers and all it is like animation, like, sure, they might see value in that, but I guess my point is that like you should be putting out the kind of work that you want to be doing and making sure that the people that you want to see it are seeing it. So,
and how do you do that? Has there been like a moment or something that you've done in the past that really sticks out as like this is working, this is
yeah, well, I feel like it's a really, you were saying quick fire, but I feel like it's pretty really complicated.
Sorry, got deep on this one.
Oh, you're good.
No. I'm bad at rapid fire.
I would say like things like that Closey story are like a really cool example of like the in-person version, like really just getting yourself out there, not being like annoying, but just like, hey, like, this is who I am, would love to work with you. Here's what you need to get in touch with me and see more about me. And after doing that enough times, like something will work. As far as online, I feel like, just contacting the people that you might want to work with and making sure that you have, it's a tough subject because I feel like you should just try to get in touch with the people that you want to work with and not be afraid to reach out because what do you have to lose?
Mm-hmm.
Like for me, like sending that cold DM to Imminent probably ultimately blossomed into, having a job there.
Right.
So like that little DM, which seemed so insignificant at the time, like it really just cascades if you like just keep on pushing and, not stepping on people's toes, like make sure that like you're being, just make sure you're being like, just don't be a dick. And you should be okay.
Yeah, man, there's a surprising power to just being like a cool dude.
Yeah.
All right.
I think a lot of people say otherwise, but like it's.
Yeah, I mean, you obviously have to have some skills and like get the job done, but all things being equal, you're going to want to work with the person you get along with the best.
Yeah.
Again, if you had the choice. All right. I'll do actual rapid fire this time. I kind of went down that rabbit hole a little bit. Let's just do some this or that favorites type of things. Octane versus Redshift. We know this one.
Yeah, I don't use Redshift, so Octane.
Hell yeah.
It's one of those things where like awesome program. I'm sure it's amazing, but I just haven't really decided that it's something that I need to learn. So
yeah. Favorite Cinema 4D plugin?
Signal, 100%. Totally Signal, especially for animation, like in DJ loops. Like, I couldn't live without it. There's no way I could, like every single project that I have has Signal in it to like an extreme degree. Mm-hmm. And just using it on like parented nulls, even like in having, like one set of Signal thing affect like the next set of Signal animation and just having it all compound is like, I love that stuff. So
yeah, Signal's the best.
And for those who don't know, Signal is like an animation program or plugin where it basically eliminates keyframes and allows you to kind of like attach any parameter in Cinema 4D to this like LFO style animation curve. And it gives you a ton of really cool tools to like animate. So that's
so useful for music.
Yeah.
Because the LFO parallel it just makes so much sense. A program outside of cinema that you use all the time.
We just like check my taskbar.
Most used.
I'm gonna say I'm actually like looking at it. I'm gonna say World Machine, just because everybody talks about World Creator, but World Machine is an awesome program. If you like nodes, it makes sense. You know, there's like Gaia or something like that. Andrew has tried to put me on it a bunch of times, but I think it's similar. But I love World Machine. I love combining World Creator, World Machine. I think terrains are probably like one of my favorite things to work on in 3D in general. So yeah, but World Machine, just because it doesn't get enough love, like everybody talks about World Creator.
Right. Shout out World Machine.
Yeah.
Let's see. Top resource for learning this stuff. And that's kind of broad because there's a fuck ton of topics. If you have a couple of them,
I would say it's like exploded since I started learning. You know, the amount of resources that are out there. Like when I started learning cinema, it was Grayscale Gorilla. Like I learned so much from them. And when I started getting into Octane, of course, can you guess?
Octane Jesus.
Yep, David Aryu. Him and his like early Octane tutorials like got me started. I actually went to a one of Beeple's like MoGraph parties, and him and Beeple and like all the Corridor Digital people were there, and I just got to be like, oh my god, thank you. Felt like everybody that I'd ever like learned something from was there, and I got to be like, I was stoked. Obviously, like the MoGraph.com people, like they do a lot of really incredible stuff. iDesign has a lot of great like quick tips and just like stuff for cinema. Yeah, I feel like that's a good list.
Oh yeah. All right, a couple final things. Any like one piece of advice or one thing that somebody could do who is trying to get into this stuff or is, you know, maybe in this world that will help them to be successful?
It sounds so cliche, but just like to have fun with it. Like, especially in that like learning period, like I was describing my time in Flagstaff where like I had a lot of time on my hands. I was DJing, I was like making it for myself when I was like playing around and stuff. And it was just like so much fun, you know, like learning how to like make this art and like find a way to like apply it. I guess that's like my experience, but like I think the reason why I've stuck with it is because like I found a reason. Well, I feel like I'm mixing answers now. I don't know. I would say just have fun with it and find a way to like apply it. You know, like take your art somewhere and like find a way to share it with people. Or you could just make it for yourself. Do it like do you. But like for me, like have like knowing that I would make something and then it would be shown on a screen to like all these people, like that was like lit this like fire under my butt. I was like, man, this is so cool. So